We have some news from Donald Trump on tariffs related to Russia. Donald Trump's frustration with Vladimir Putin continues to boil over. He was in a meeting in the Oval Office yesterday with NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte and made some comments about, get this, a 100% tariff potentially on Russia. We can go ahead here and roll C1.
We are very unhappy, I am, with Russia, but we're very, very unhappy with them, and we're going to be doing very severe tariffs if we don't have a deal in 50 days. Tariffs at about 100%. You'd call them secondary tariffs. As you know, we've spent $350 billion approximately on this war with Russia and Ukraine, and would like to see it end. It wasn't my war, it was Biden's war. We want to see it end. And I'm disappointed in President Putin because I thought we would have had a deal 2 months ago, but it doesn't seem to get there. So based on that, we're going to be doing secondary tariffs if we don't have a deal in 50 days. It's very simple. And they'll be at 100%.
Okay, so that seems to be Donald Trump acknowledging or realizing, not acknowledging, but realizing, Krystal, that he is losing leverage. What did he say to Zelensky? You don't have the cards. It seems like Trump is walking headfirst into what many of his critics said earlier was just the reality that Putin is so determined to continue the war that for Donald Trump to come to the table on this and get a deal, not within 24 hours, but even within a month, 2 months, 3 months, 4 months, 5 months, 6 months is where we are right now.
Yeah.
There will likely have to be significantly more concessions from Ukraine than the Trump administration right now is willing to entertain.
Yeah, no, it would be a bitter pill to swallow. I mean, there's no doubt that ending this conflict will be difficult and would require really forcing Ukraine to accept, significant annexing of their territory by Russia. And that is a bitter pill to swallow. There's no doubt about it. It may be an unacceptable pill to swallow for, I think a lot of Americans would object to that. And that's part of why you have these wars go on and on and on, because it's easier to sustain them and kick the can down the road than it is to actually bring them to a ugly, messy, which it would be, conclusion. And, Trump came in incredibly arrogant, never was really pressed on how he would bring about this magical end of the conflict. Before he even was in office, in 24 hours, he would have this ended. And, I think he was arrogant and foolish enough to believe that he had that kind of relationship with Putin where he could just call his buddy on the phone and be able to work something out and do a deal the way that he is accustomed to doing. And obviously, reality has hit him in the face right now. And so he's swinging now in the other direction and going hard neocon. I mean, in some ways, now we're getting a preview of a policy that will even be more hawkish than what the Biden administration did between this, the hawks like Lindsey Graham have been pushing additional aggressive sanctions on Russia, which, guys, Russia's already the most sanctioned country on the planet. Like, the idea that additional sanctions are going to further do anything, I mean, I think it's far-fetched.
We should skip to C4 then. Sorry to go out of order, control room, but to your point, let's put C4 up on the screen. The Russian stock market actually went up 2.4% yesterday, which, it goes to exactly the point that you were just making. Like, they have maybe actually what Trump could have said at this Oval Office presser yesterday with Mark Rutte could have even been worse. Maybe stocks went up because there was an anticipation that Trump could have done something that wasn't related to sanctions, or that was in some ways worse than a 100%. I mean, like, they've been sanctioned to hell already.
Right.
There's not much you can do on that front to make things worse.
Well, in addition, we don't have an element for this because we're just seeing it, but Financial Times published a scoop that Trump asked Zelensky if Ukraine could hit Moscow. According to people who were briefed on the call, Trump has privately encouraged Ukraine to step up deep strikes on Russian territory, even asking Zelensky whether he could strike Moscow if the U.S. provided long-range weapons, which we know now we are going to provide. According to people briefed on those discussions, the conversation took place during the July 4th call between the U.S. and Ukraine. Ukrainian leaders marks a sharp departure from Trump's previous stance on Russia's war, and his campaign promise to end U.S. involvement in foreign conflicts remains unclear whether Washington will deliver such weapons, but it appears that we are. Their sort of cope is like, oh, well, NATO's going to pay for it, but first we're shipping the weapons, and we'll see if we get reimbursed on the back end, I guess. The discussion underscores Trump's deepening frustration with Putin's refusal to engage in ceasefire talks. So you remember how he talked on the campaign trail, and I think justifiably so. His desire to end this conflict, as articulated, at times during his campaign, I think was one of the appeals, certainly with the Republican base, but I think more broadly with the American people as well, was part of a key to him creating this impression that he would be an anti-war president. And he talked about how we were flirting with World War III, that under Kamala Harris we would get World War III because of this conflict with another nuclear-armed superpower. And so now here you are, fast forward to July 15th, and he's encouraging Ukraine to strike Moscow and strike St. Petersburg as well with weapons provided by us. I mean, look, I get that we've gotten this far and there hasn't been a nuclear blowup. That's good. But that doesn't mean that a catastrophic escalation isn't still something that we have to concern ourselves with.
That's a really good point about how he was criticizing potential Harris administration. And when we look back on the Biden administration, the bluster was so dangerous. The attackums, it really, really was dangerous. And Republicans capitalized on that. And one of Donald Trump's most important arguments from his perspective about how he approaches Vladimir Putin is that he doesn't needlessly antagonize Putin. And this is what neocons, critics said all along was foolish about Trump's strategy towards Putin. How many American presidents have gone in and said they, saw Putin's soul? I think that was George W. Bush in his eyes, and they have trusted Putin. And the neocons said it always happens. You always get the rug pulled out from under you by Vladimir Putin, et cetera, et cetera. Well, it doesn't undermine Trump's point that it's better not to be antagonistic towards Putin, but it does start to make it look like Trump had carried with that some genuine naivete about his relationship with Vladimir Putin, to your point, Krystal, that it is not panning out the way that he thought it would, where essentially he was like, well, we can just pick up the phone, I'll send Steve Witkoff, and we'll make a deal. Did not go quite that way, and we can sense his frustration. I'm going to play this moment that Trump had with a reporter in that meeting with the NATO Secretary General yesterday. This is C2.
I want to get the war settled. They're not Americans that are dying in it, and I have a problem, and JD has a problem. It's a stance that he's had for a long time. They're not Americans dying, but there are a lot of people dying, and on something that should be able to be settled. And we all agree with that. But I am very disappointed with President Putin. I thought he was somebody that meant what he said, and he'll talk so beautifully, and then he'll bomb people at night. We don't like that. Thank you, everybody. Thank you.
So, Krystal, I know that Trump, and this actually I do understand, doesn't like to telegraph exactly how far he might go. But now we pretty honestly have to ask ourselves a question if it's as far as the Biden administration was willing to go in ways that really were gambling with potential nuclear escalation.
Yeah, I mean, at this point, the policy is pretty indistinguishable from the Biden administration, and he seems prepared to continue pushing it forward, which was the effective trajectory of the Biden administration, because it was, we sort of drew lines around, okay, well, we consider these defensive weapons, and then, okay, we want these longer range things, and over time, you give more and more and more and more. And there were always these, operations that were occurring pretty quickly. We got to operations that were quite inflammatory that were occurring within Russia, and we just sort of, turned a blind eye to that, even though we had said originally that we wanted to keep the conflict within Ukraine and not have these attacks within Russia. And so that trajectory of continued step-by-step escalation at this point appears to be followed by the Trump administration as well. And the thing that frustrated me under the Biden administration, the thing that frustrates me now is I just don't think anyone could explain or really has a plan for how this is brought to an end. Like, right. Okay, and then they strike within Moscow. What then? Like, there's no sign that Russia is just one Moscow or St. Petersburg strike away from, oh, you know what, you're right. We capitulate. We want to come to the table. We want to strike a deal that's going to be acceptable for Zelensky. There's no sign of that. So, it's one of these incredibly foolish and idiotic, but very typical American foreign policy situations where there's just sort of like, it takes on a logic of its own. And there's really no plan or no feasible plan for effectuating any kind of a positive or beneficial or least bad of all options sort of an outcome. It's just, well, I guess we're going to do this now and see what happens.
Well, and that frustrates to no end. Obviously, people like Elbridge Colby, who caught all kinds of strays in the press last week for trying to pause some of these weapons because the United States at any given moment, whether or not you or I agree with the policy, could find itself in a kinetic conflict over Taiwan, and Trump overruled that. So those frustrations are just going to be, I think, stronger and stronger among the people who were, I don't know that anyone has the ability to do anything about it. I mean, this is clearly, Trump is driving the show on this. It doesn't matter to some extent that there were people brought in who disagree with the hawkishness here. But that frustration from hawks and just from regular people like that's a pretty significant concern. I want to roll this clip from Fox News. This is Lisa Booth reacting to Trump's comments. Let's go ahead and roll this as C3.
See the business guy in President Trump. Look, I have concerns similar to what Paul expressed about, is this war never ending with Russia and Ukraine? Will it ever end? Russia has a larger military. They have more people to sacrifice at the altar of this war. However, I think President Trump deserves our deference. He's always right. When has he been wrong about foreign policy? His naysayers are everyone said there was going to be a World War III after, sending those bombs to Iran and taking out some of their nuclear facilities, or at least badly damaging them. That didn't come to fruition. Right. So he's repeatedly been, moving the embassy to Jerusalem. Everyone was worried about that. Right. So everyone has been wrong. He's always been right. So he deserves our deference.
Krystal, I was thinking about this. It reminds me of like if you have a friend who's playing blackjack and they're like, hit me. And they make the most irrational call and they end up winning. And then they turn to you and they're like, see, you were wrong. And I'm like, no, I wasn't. You shouldn't have done that. I'm glad it worked out really well, but you shouldn't have done that. This is not the right strategy.
Right. Well, and I mean, with the Iran thing, that presumes that that's all over and done, which we're about to talk about Israel, is not a good assumption whatsoever. But I mean, it speaks to this broader conversation about MAGA disappointments with Trump, and certainly the most upset I've seen any portion of the MAGA base is over Jeffrey Epstein, although already in real time you see the influencers trying to gather everybody. You know what? We're going to trust Trump. We're going to move on. But, you would think that on a matter of war and peace, this really was a central promise of how he would be different than a potential Kamala Harris administration. And now you've got a complete 180 where it's just an embrace effectively of the Biden policy and, the line here, at least from this individual on Fox News. But I think, I don't think we'll see much upset over this from the MAGA influencer world or the MAGA faithful is, well, he knows what he's doing, so we'll just trust Trump. That's what it always kind of comes back to.
Yeah. And, I think that sounds rather naive, to put it nicely, I suppose, or charitably.
I don't think you should trust anybody.
That's what I was just going to say.
Yeah, I mean, I don't care how much you like the guy or feel like whatever. Like, no. And, I think there were a lot of people on the Democratic side who fell into this trap under the Obama administration where it was like, well, we love this guy. So sure, he's like upping the drone war and doing these, like getting a list of people to assassinate and going forward with it and committing all these. But it's Obama. So he must be doing it in a responsible way. And, I think it's even more so with Trump because he has such a strong force and cult of personality that this idea of just like, well, he must know better. So we're just going to trust him on this. We're just going to trust him on Iran. We're just going to trust him on Epstein and whatever. That is a place where I think it is always safe for MAGA influencers to land.
I know we're both in the same boat on this, but however this war is a meat grinder, it is a tragedy every single day. So if Trump pulls this off, if he says hit me and it works, then I think that would be wonderful. But we are 6 months in, and he's even testing the patience of Fox News on the Ukraine question. So not a time for optimism as it relates to finally getting an end to this.
Hey, if you like that video, hit the like button or leave a comment below. It really helps get the show to more people.
And if you'd like to get the full show ad-free and in your inbox every morning, you can sign up at breakingpoints.com.
That's right. Get the full show, help support the future of independent media at breakingpoints.com.